What happened at work that made everyone quit at once? I worked at a chain pizza place. The manager didn't approve of how well we cleaned and prepped for the next day. So we all came into a note saying something to the effect of, "You are all replaceable." So we all said, "Okay," took off the uniform and left. We didn't even lock up or close up shop, just walked off. Phones were ringing for orders. There were people coming into the dining area, but nobody was there working. Once she realized nobody was there, she was calling everyone going crazy, telling us to come to work or we're fired. One person went back and tried to save it. I just reminded her that I was replaceable, and so was the person who signed my check, then hung up. They had to close for about a week or two to replace the staff. The location completely closed and filed bankruptcy less than a year later, at least partly due to her leadership. The location is a Verizon store now. Well, I felt secondhand pride for him and his coworkers sticking up for themselves. Good job. Story 2. The company did a survey of employee happiness. It had super limited answers. We filled it out and tried to explain that internally our team was doing well and we were happy, but just about everyone had problems with 2 other employees outside the team who were bullies in important positions. The company asked us instead what we could do better so the bullies don't bully. Over half the team quit within a month, which was unheard of at that company, and our team was/is a cornerstone of the entire business. Story 3. Smallish company with a very necessary programming team of 5 people. The CEO spent several $100,000 repainting and refurbishing the building, deciding he didn't like the color and got it redone in the same month. Then the lockdown hit and the company was suddenly struggling for money. The CEO decided to retrench 2 of our team members. At first, we thought he had picked these 2 because they were less familiar with the systems. But then the other 3 of us were told by the CEO that those 2 were in the most rough positions financially, and one was expecting another kid in a few weeks, and that this meant that they could hire them back as contractors for cheap because they'd be desperate. And the next week, the 3 of us chatted among ourselves, all resigned, and they had to keep the other 2 devs on with their standard paycheck for longer, all while looking for new places to work. Story 4. Not my work, but close friends. The restaurant owner wasn't paying his staff and checks kept bouncing. So one night they all said, "Screw this," closed up shop together and left. The owner ran out of town after social media and regular media took over. He closed down both of his places. The second also had a staff walk out the week prior to the first and sold the buildings. This was an MD, and the second place was his second restaurant, Indian place, that had kitchen staff walk out a week prior, but the walkout didn't close the restaurant. He closed it and sold it after his first restaurant was shuttered. Good riddance. Story 5. I worked at a KFC in the 80s. We had a really cool manager. I was assistant manager along with another, and lots of other great young people worked there. Our manager was hired to turn around the store, and he was given a budget to buy new equipment. He also saved money on paper products and got the store really clean with our help. At the end of the year, he was fired by the upper management for spending too much. They then brought in a new manager who immediately set about giving us all a hard time. Everyone walked. The store had to shut down for several days, and the new guy brought in his family to help run it. Their store shut down permanently a few years later. The district manager offered me a job in management, but I just didn't trust them at that point. Story 6. Worked at Dairy Queen. Someone was stealing money regularly during the closing shift. Many of us had a suspicion of who it was, and I'm pretty sure most of us told our manager for fear of being blamed ourselves. We were certain it was the assistant manager who was with us on those closing shifts. Instead, our manager started randomly firing younger staff members for any minor discretion and blaming the missing money on them. When they fired me, it was the last straw, and several of my coworkers walked out in solidarity. Newsflash, it was the assistant manager all along. I ended up threatening to go to the labor board and they kind of paid me off. This was about 15 years ago. I'm very much over it. It was my first real job in high school, and I was there for almost 2 years. I'm Canadian. It was a DQ in Ontario, and my boss knew she was in for a world of trouble if I disclosed some of their practices. I did not sign an NDA. I think my manager was afraid to let anything get to a higher level. They added like $1,000 to my final paycheck that had no real explanation why it was there. In all honesty, it could have been that I was young and didn't quite understand how loose ends get tied up after someone is fired. Maybe their version of severance, I really don't know. That's just how my 17-year-old brain made sense of it at the time. Anyways, I see that assistant manager out and about all the time, and after all this time, she still can't look in my direction. Story 7. One of my first jobs was as a dishwasher at a local steakhouse, which was always really busy as it overlooked the waterfalls of the local river. My third or fourth day working, the whole kitchen staff just didn't show up, except for me. The boss grabbed me and taught me how to cook as we went. Not only had I never cooked before, this was a Friday night and I was missing a concert, so I was kind of angry about that. Probably not the culinary experience some of the customers expected that night, but I tried my best. Then, after we closed, I had to stick around for another 4 hours to wash dishes. Turns out everybody went to the concert. This was almost 40 years ago. Still mad. Story 8. I worked at a cheap clothing retail store while I was in college, 15, 20 hours a week for the first several months, as was most of the staff. Then we got a new manager who decided that the state mandated paid breaks 15 minutes after 4 hours were a waste of money. So he changed everyone's shifts to 3-hour, 45 minutes or less so no one would get a paid break. Then people complained, so he hired a bunch of new people and reduced the old staff to about one shift a week. Lost pretty much everyone who actually knew what they were doing in less than a month. I heard most of the new people also quit pretty quickly once they figured out how dumbly the place was run. Story 9. We didn't all quit at once, but within a week or two of the event, it was an optometrist's office and I was one of just 4 employees. The doctor invited another practice to move in and share space with us in an already cramped and disorganized office. We had to do all the work to make room for them. The doctor never broke from her usual routine to help us with the transition or stayed late as we all did. Then the new doctor arrived, having let all of his staff go, assuming that we would work for him without being paid by him. The practices weren't merging in any way. He hired only one person who was barely out of high school, who had no idea what they were doing. Guess who had to train them? And the doctor never reduced the amount of appointments we took. We had our usual heavy workload all along. Our patients shared a waiting room with theirs. They were not prompt in taking their patients back, but we were. Their patients threw us dirty looks and sometimes yelled at us for ignoring them. But we were forbidden from saying anything to them about why we ever helped only half the people who came in the door, or why we couldn't answer their questions and had to redirect them to the least knowledgeable person in the room, the other doctor's one employee. The doctor refused point blank to listen to any of our concerns. We all quit, and the practice sold out to one of the eyeglass chains a few months later. Well, mustn't be a good optometrist. They didn't see that one coming. Story 10. I worked at 7-Eleven for 2 years. We are the busiest gas station in the area because we were the first one off the highway and a block from the hockey arena. When I started, the task list we had was manageable. If things were really busy, we'd miss a couple, but the next shift was able to pick it up. By the time I quit, we were lucky to finish 1/3 of the list. The area manager kept making it longer because she thought we could do more. But that's not what made me quit. I handed in my 2-week notice when we were told that we'd no longer have a cook. You know, the one who would bread and cook the chicken, wedges, and wings and fry the corn dogs. Instead, they were bringing in pre-breaded garbage that the cashiers would have to throw the cook on top of all the normal stuff, which we struggled to do already. A good chunk of us quit because of that. Found out about 2 months later that the idea only lasted a month because chicken sales were only 1/3 of what they normally were. A few months after this, another good chunk left because the woman who had been working there for around 20 years left. Story 11. My boss used to gather everyone every morning and think he was laying down the law by gurning out whatever came to his head first thing in the morning, and he always finished up with his whinge with, "And if you don't like it, you know where the gate is." We all got together and agreed the next day when he said it, we would all just immediately turn and head for the gate. We were in the middle of a multi-million-pound contract, and we then demanded we get better working conditions, better overtime rate, and allowed days off if we needed it. Otherwise, we all walk. Story 12. I worked at a popular burrito restaurant that was understaffed. The corporate manager implemented some policies that caused a few people to quit. Then, when fall hit, some of the teenage workers quit to go back to school. The corporate manager didn't want to hire more because we could do without them. Students were being pressured to work during their school hours and after midnight, which is illegal. And unachievable standards were being set. Some days it would just be 2 or 3 people when there were supposed to be 9 or more. The corporate manager said we weren't allowed to hire anyone else until she could figure out why everyone was quitting. Whenever we told her why everyone was quitting, she would tell us we were just stupid and didn't know what we were talking about. New store managers were brought in, but they had never worked at this chain restaurant before, so they were essentially just new hires. One of the new managers was pestering the students. Corporate required all of our hours to be cut, so we got minimal break time, not like we were taking breaks anyway. The corporate manager radiated big screw all of you vibes whenever she was around. Essentially, she blamed us for being lazy and making her job harder. All through this, the general manager, the GM of the restaurant, a really great guy, was trying his hardest to hold everything together. But the more he did, the angrier the corporate manager got and the more arbitrary restrictions she placed on him. He started ignoring her, and she got mad. Eventually, he decided to quit and told those of us remaining that he would help us find new jobs if we wanted to quit too. One of the big things the corporate manager told us was that we were never allowed to close the store, no matter how few employees were there. Well, we all quit right before the biggest promotional event of the year. The corporate manager had to work at the store herself. She closed the store on the biggest promotional day of the year, even though she forbade us from closing it on a regular day. There was a lot more going on, but I need to go sleep. Why are the people who get to make the decisions usually the least qualified people? Story 13. Poor pay for laborious work, passing highly qualified people up for promotions, and giving that spot to someone with no experience or training in the field who was personally connected to someone in management led to my decision to leave. This happened over about a month ago. My leaving was the breaking point for most people. I was the one maintenance guy who would actually answer calls and get things done. I left after getting turned down for an R&D position, which I did at my previous job in a more technical field. Within a week, 2 warehouse guys left, along with 3 production people, which was half of that department. Then, shortly after that, even the HR girl left, along with the maintenance manager. It's not a big company, but a very popular one in the RVing and towing products trade. Too bad the owners only care about profit and not employees being able to afford housing. Story 14. I worked in a skilled nursing facility that was amazing, with many employees who had worked there for 5+ years. They got taken over by a new management company who did not give a damn about the patients or staff at the beginning of lockdown. They tried to cut pay and force us to work longer hours than we already were. They fired our amazing director of nursing for standing up to them, demanding they stop rationing our PPE. They told us we used too much, they couldn't afford it, and we would just have to wear the same PPE the whole shift between positive and negative patients and deal with the outbreaks. We had outbreaks and many patients did not survive. It was a nightmare. Every staff member called and reported to the state and quit. They called a lot of us, demanding we come back, threatening to report us to the state for patient abandonment, and telling us they would take action to make us lose our licenses. Nobody came back. They had to scramble and fill our positions with registry staff that they ended up having to pay way more than they were paying us. They ended up being investigated by the state and shut down for having so many safety violations, and luckily, the remaining patients got transferred to safer facilities. Story 15. I worked at a catering company for 8 years. After that, I went to culinary school, moved to the big city, and started working in proper restaurants. I was trying to increase my skills aggressively and would, as per agreement with chefs, work for 1 year at each place before moving on. While planning my next step, the new owner of the catering company I used to work for contacted me. I was the guy he had heard could turn the place back around. I got a generous salary and the promise of funds to replace and renew the business, which was still largely populated by my former coworkers. The guy was so full of crap, it was clear this was a misstep, but if I agreed to do a job, I stick to a year contract or not. Anyway, we made about 30% of our yearly income during Thanksgiving and Christmas. Prior to Thanksgiving, he just typed up and printed a piece of paper and stuck it next to the schedule, outlining pay decreases for events and the like. I told him no one would work until he met with us to discuss it. He didn't show. Those of us who could afford to leave, single, no kids or mortgage, most of us, left. He shuttered 6 months later, and as a bonus to me, he was audited by the IRS, lost his vacation home and his law practice. Story 16. I worked at the largest apartment complex in my area, about 800 units in maintenance. The office crew had about 10 people and maintenance had 9. We had a great group with an amazing property manager and maintenance supervisor. The property manager took an offer managing a beautiful resort property. In came the new property manager who had next to no experience, and she started to try to change things even though it ran fine as it was. She also became a mouthpiece for corporate. Everything they suggested, she put straight back out to us. Within a month, 7 of 9 maintenance employees put in their 2 weeks' notice, including the maintenance supervisor. The next month, 5 office workers put in their 2 weeks. A few months later, I heard that the new property manager shut down the entire office and maintenance department to take them all to some golf tournament and got herself fired for it. Story 17. Long time ago at a coffee shop, me and a coworker were effectively teamed up as openers and had a regular schedule. One day, a very annoying manager was there who had a history of being a real schmuck to female employees. He made a sexist and racist remark to my coworker in front of the massive line of customers we saw every morning and knew by name. I could see her begin welling up. The people in front heard, for sure, and I saw them react in surprise. My partner took off her apron and left. The manager turned to me, looking for some messed up white bro solidarity, and made another racist remark about finding good help. I went from stunned to walking immediately. My last act there was to hold the door for the huge crowd of customers who walked out when we did. Story 18. It was way back in my high school days. I had a part-time job at a coffee shop. The entire precinct, it was a fisherman's wharf kind of setup, was managed by the same company, so the bar, the restaurant, the coffee shop, we were all employed by the same bosses. Started off great, then a change of ownership happened and the new owners were schmucks. They cut back hours, tried to drop wages, all the usual stuff. So the staff was already primed to mutiny when a busy Friday night rolled around. I had a friend who worked with me in the coffee shop. She was a dishwasher, but her duties also included collecting leftover plates from the outdoor dining areas. She also has spina bifida, which meant she wasn't always steady on her feet. Well, the new owners decided it wasn't a good look that she collected the dishes with a trolley and told her she had to use a tray instead. This led inevitably to her dropping a whole tray of dishes on her way back to the coffee shop. Okay, she might have done it intentionally, but they certainly couldn't prove that. She got yelled at in front of both staff and customers, and all the staff from the restaurant, the coffee shop, and the bar walked out on the spot. The place went under soon after because I'm guessing they didn't treat the next lot of staff any better than they treated us. Story 19. I was a shift manager at IHOP overseeing the overnight shift. The new general manager repeatedly disrespected me while I was home asleep during the day because, as you know, I worked at night. He would call me for trivial reasons, tell me I needed to come in earlier, or ask me to work double. This also happened if someone called out and he needed emergency help. After months of mistreatment on the job, I had a really bad night. My entire shift consisted of only 3 people total, myself working as server, to-go, hostess, bagger, dishwasher, and prepper for the next shift, and 2 cooks who worked on alternate days. Anyway, we had a super bad night. There were far too many customers. We told them it would be an hour wait, and everyone would get super mad just because we told them that. The seats appeared empty, yes, but it was because we had way too many people, parties of 6 and 8 all wanting to come in at once. Plus, online orders were rolling in because everyone else was closed. Then people kept coming in and ordering to go. Literally, every customer for months had been angry and cussing because it just took too long. We didn't have enough staff on our shift because the GM claimed we didn't need the help. Well, things got so bad that day that I called the GM for some help. That's his job, damn it. No answer. Do I call the assistant general manager? No answer. Do I call the GM one more time, and if he didn't answer, I was going to do what I wasn't allowed to do. Close the doors to all dine-in and to-go orders and only fulfill already paid for online orders. He didn't answer, and so that's what I did. I dealt with customers being angry we were closed and also performed all my duties, even staying late because I was so far behind. The GM rolled in about 10 a.m. I was supposed to leave at 6 a.m., guys, but I couldn't until another manager came in. He took me to the office to hand over the bank, which is just the register drawer. Then he told me, I can't have that happen again. Calling me in the middle of the night like that, it's unacceptable. You're a manager and should be able to problem solve on your own. I cut him off because I was tired of the BS and said, yeah, you're right. I'll start solving my problem by handing in a formal letter of my 2 weeks' notice. Then, as I stood up to leave, I added, better yet, I'll just leave now and pretend my 2 weeks ended today. My loyal 2 cooks were actually there that day. One stayed with me to make sure I got home safely. I had no vehicle. And the other came in to unload the truck for extra cash. They overheard me say I was leaving, and just like that, one cook threw his hat in the trash and said, screw it, I'm out too, disrespectful a-hole. And the other said, yeah, I can get a better job. I stayed because she was a good manager. So, just like that, he lost his whole overnight staff. To this day, I hope he is suffering with customer complaints. And if you're nodding in agreement to some of these stories, heck yeah, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 20. Not all at once, but within a team of 10, everyone had left within 3 months of me leaving. Terrible manager. I started a new job in November as a number 2, knowing I could do the number 1 job but didn't want the hassle of management. Within 2 months, the team was asking me anyway because the actual manager was bad and also blamed others for her incompetence. I was already over it when a potential new recruit turned down the job because they had heard bad things about the manager, who sat us all down for a whoever is talking badly about the team is very unprofessional and lying, this team is great. I decided I didn't need this crap when I knew that good team was not this, so I resigned and was gone by the following September. Everyone else was out or had resigned by December because they'd seen how it could be and decided when I left that they weren't going back to what the manager did. Story 21. GameStop. We were EB Games and then GameStop bought us out. At first, they left us alone. Eventually, they transferred our good manager for a complete schmuck. She immediately ripped up everyone's school schedule and said if you work for her, then school isn't important. As a key carrier, I remade the schedule and my next shift, I kept the store closed and put a sign in that said the manager was a witch and to shop elsewhere. When she came in at noon and asked why the store was closed, I quit. Well, she changed the schedule for the following week and ignored people's school stuff, so the entire staff quit. She was fired, but I had already gotten a better job. Story 22. I worked at a marketing agency that was close to bankruptcy due to bad management, and the websites I was making were basically keeping the ship afloat. The owners were a couple who were completely different from each other. The guy, let's call him John, was friendly and kind, while the woman, let's call her Joanna, was moody and awkwardly bossy. Sadly, Joanna's sister passed away, which increased the tension within the agency. Joanna became quite upset and did all sorts of weird things like bringing a witch to the office to clear bad energies. John mentioned other things that happened but wouldn't elaborate. For weeks, she was inexplicably angry at us and even moved her computer to our workstation to keep an eye on us. She stated we weren't supposed to talk each other during business hours unless it was strictly work-related small talk. We all felt uncomfortable, plus we were getting tasks from both of them for completely opposite projects and such. We decided to quit all at once, and so we did. Story 23. Not quite everyone, but 3 of us handed our notice within a few days of each other in response to having our wages cut by 20% for 18 months previously to help the business, which was really struggling, only for the managing director to roll up to work one morning in a shiny new Jaguar. We had already overlooked the extension on his house that was being built. The financial director was no better and spent every waking minute telling us about his skiing holiday he was so looking forward to. They waved goodbye to the IT manager, production manager, and head designer, all because the company directors got greedy. Story 24. This wasn't everyone, but it was damn close. In a famous park, there are ice cream shops. When bringing a new container, employees are required to take a sample to verify it's still good. On top of this, it was very common for the staff to give other staff free ice cream. Now, this is pretty normal most years. This year, however, we had a new manager. She thought it was a good idea to fire anyone who had received free ice cream. After this, about 1/3 of our staff was fired. Since many people came to work there with a buddy, they quit. By the end of the mass leaving, we had about 1/5 of the staffing we needed to run the kitchens and hotels effectively. So she decided we would work 7 days a week and reject all vacation requests. Many of the workers were not from the USA, so they were unsure about labor laws. The company banned websites for labor industries, health departments, and most other government beneficial services. It got so bad that one girl was so overworked, she worked 6 a.m. to 2 a.m., 7 days a week, that she just left to go on a week-long vacation, but out of fear of being fired and deported, she didn't tell anyone. They had to call the Rangers and get search and rescue involved since she disappeared for about 8 days. I'm talking about dozens of people searching the woods and helicopters searching. Eventually, she walked back into the dorm well-rested and much happier. Thankfully, she did not get fired. The manager was fired for breaching multiple state and federal labor laws after the Rangers talked with her. The company was sued and the workers got an okay payout. Story 25. This didn't happen to me, but to a department where I used to work. I was employed at a very large international grocery store. The department it happened to was made up of the guys who collected the carts. They were all male, no girls in that department. The day it happened, it was a downpour all day with no breaks in the rain. Their manager told them they were not allowed to use the machine that pushes all the carts for them. I have no idea what it's called. The management's reason was that it was breaking the carts. They should have bought a better one. They asked if they could use bungee cords because there were a lot of carts. Yes, it was busy as hell that day. They were told no. It had to be done by hand, all of it. I'd also like to point out that there were only 4 to 5 guys in this department. They all said, screw that, and all left. Story 26. A rich schmuck owned a restaurant on the local wharf. He called up Intoxicated and probably spiked one night and ordered a bunch of meals for him and his friends, yelling about how they better get delivered to him ASAP. The manager rushed the food through, packed it up, and got in his car and drove to the guy's house. Empty. He called the guy to find out where he was, and he started yelling down the phone at the manager, "I'm on my boat, you idiot." The manager tried to apologize, and the guy hung up on him. Next thing, the schmuck had driven the boat back to the wharf. He stormed into the restaurant, yelling how he couldn't believe how stupid everyone was, screaming and carrying on, and fired them all on the spot. The employment agency got involved, and everyone got their jobs back, and the schmuck ended up being trespassed from his own bar. Pretty much everyone ended up quitting a few weeks later as a final screw you to the guy. Story 27. A guy with lofty ambitions managed to work his way up to become a technician. A more clueless guy doesn't exist on this planet. He was first posted to a department in our factory to improve productivity and fine-tune the machines therein. Didn't work. He was making things worse. Everywhere he went, he made things worse to the point where some machines were almost destroyed through his ineptitude. Then he used more of his ambition, brown-nosing, to become head of the technicians. That's when the entire technician workforce just up and quit. Every single one. We're talking at least some 30 people. Management realized they messed the bed and begged the techs to come back. The techs told management that either he goes or they go, and management can find a new technician workforce. Cue mad scramble to figure out what to do with the situation. The techs had basically quit and had collectively gone home. Someone suggested they find the brown-noser another position somewhere else, another city, as far away as possible from here. The management told the brown-noser he couldn't be head of the technicians here as someone more qualified got it, so they found him another position. A position 1,600 kilometers away in another country. The brown-noser took the job, and that was the last we saw of him. Cue collective sigh of relief. Story 28. We worked at a startup with amazing co-founders. Our CEO and COO were the coolest people I've met. Our company was doing well. We were some 6 to 8 months away from break-even, and cash burn was so low, we hadn't needed funding in almost 5 years. The startup was funded by foreign VCs who had no understanding of the local markets. They wanted insane growth when the industry we were in just didn't have that kind of growth potential. So the VCs got the co-founders fired. 5 of 8 departmental heads and at least 15% of total employees of the company quit within the next 3 months. Story 29. I worked at a company as a software engineer. We were a group of employees under an organization with no direct reporting manager. We just worked on our projects with our project managers and functioned well. We were happy. Then came new management, and they decided we needed a reporting manager. The guy assigned was toxic as heck. After a few complaints from the whole team and no action from upper management, most of us quit within months. I think we went from being 20 or so to 8 when I left, and I heard that the rest followed shortly after. Then when everyone had left, upper management thought it was a good time to reevaluate the reporting manager. They relieved him of his role and moved him to a different one. They couldn't even have the guts to fire him, but by then it was too little, too late. Story 30. We found out that once one of our fellow employees passed away at home. It was really sad. Her daughter came in to pick up her final check, and the owners didn't give her the cash tips she had accumulated when she came in. They pocketed them and spent them on whatever. On top of lying about the staff to the staff, asking very inappropriate questions, giving their high school son more hours than the full-time adult employees while he was still in school, and just overall very shady business practices, myself and 3 others just had enough. 3 of us walked out before our shift started, and the guy who was already working walked out on his lunch. We went to high school together, so I sent him a message apologizing for abandoning him. We had a celebration party that night. 2 of us that walked out had been with the company since it opened, though we had already been there for just over a year. After we left, the business didn't last an additional year. They didn't pay their building rent and just abandoned it. I own a food business myself, and they are an excellent example of what I will never do. Story 31. I worked at a logistics company that dealt with kitchens. We were pretty much the dealer for kitchen companies. We'd store their products and then deliver them to customers. When I started working there, my boss was super awesome and very chill. It was a family company, and he had inherited it from his dad, so the business had been in the family for quite some time. I worked there for about 3 years, but I decided to quit due to the long hours, 50 to 60 hours, sometimes even 70, so I left. After a few months, my colleague called me up to ask if I could come back, but just to handle the logistics, and I'd work 8 hours a day, not a minute longer. So I figured, sure. He told me the boss had left and sold the company to his companion, which was his first mistake. That person's leadership completely sucked. He literally drove pretty much all of his loyal employees away due to lack of or late payments. So the most loyal person, who had worked there since he was about 15 and was now in his 30s, just left. And it all went downhill from there. Another 2 colleagues who had worked there for a long time left not long after. After that, I decided to quit again. I've still been in touch with a colleague who got me in there, and he recently told me he also quit. So within 2 years, he pretty much lost all the employees who had worked there for literally years and years. He's only hiring kids who are dropping out of school, and they leave after a few months, and then he searches for new victims. I'm still surprised the company is still alive, but man, I love that workplace and the old boss. Story 32. Fire Department Administration. I worked in the fire department's administration with a young guy, and we both strive for perfection in everything we did. There was also a woman on her team who barely lifted a finger, seemingly protected by a sergeant who was interested in her. At one point, the sergeant started yelling at us, me and the other guy. He uttered the classic line, "Everyone is replaceable." We tried to explain that the woman was doing absolutely nothing to help us, but he just told us to shut up and leave her alone. The key detail here is that we literally carried the entire department by ourselves, doing everything perfectly despite it being a very demanding job. Well, the other guy quit, and so did I. To this day, 5 months later, I still get calls from them asking for help, which I refuse. The department is now being evaluated by internal affairs due to its lack of efficiency and is in deep trouble. As for the woman, she was eventually required to do my former job. She couldn't handle it, so she quit. Story 33. The company decided it would help keep frequent flyer and hotel rental car loyalty points earned on business travel for itself, rather than allowing employees to claim them on their personal accounts. This was an office with a lot of travel. Most employees were away from home Monday through Friday and only came home on weekends. Pretty much every week involved travel. Allowing employees to keep their frequent flyer and loyalty points had been considered a benefit of the job for years. The frequent flyer points earned allowed our family to take vacations for practically nothing. We went to Hawaii first class on Delta, stayed at a 5-star beach resort, and had a rental car for the whole week, all for free. We just had to pay for food and various outings. The year after, it was Europe. The year after, it was Costa Rica. When the company issued the memo stating that all employees would be required to use corporate rewards and frequent flyer point cards so that the company could get all the free stuff, most of the people in the office actually handed in resignation letters. The memo was rescinded a few days later. Story 34. A tour of useless higher-ups came through and noticed that some people were wearing Crocs. It's a production job and people are on their feet 12 hours a day, so some wear Crocs. They're technically not allowed, but it wasn't being enforced, so people wore them anyway. The useless higher-ups complained and the Croc people were sent home to change. A bunch of them never came back, which kicked off a chain reaction of other people having enough of the low pay, lack of appreciation, and general BS and quitting too. This was at the heart of the lockdown employment exodus, which hit our workplace particularly hard because it sucks. Useless higher-ups are useless. Story 35. Had a solid team of 20 or so people, got amazing scores on all our reports, and a high level of customer appreciation. Then they started cutting down, taking people away to see how few people they can operate with, layoffs left and right until it was eventually just the top 3 employees, myself, and 2 others. The work wasn't reduced though, so we came in every day with 100 plus tasks on our computers, and it was impossible to keep up. Our metrics dropped, people complained, and it was, all around, a crap show. We told management what the issue was, and they didn't do anything, just blamed us. We ended up moving to different jobs or positions at the same time, and that entire department got outsourced. Apparently everybody hates the new outsource, and I went by there once and met the guys, and they all looked like they hated their lives. Their office had no working AC too, in summer heat. Story 36. We had a tiny team, just 3 people, and didn't really need a manager. Still, a manager was hired. She was a micromanager, nothing was too small for her to notice. Forgot to put a double space at the start of a sentence? She would literally sit next to you for half an hour, prompting you to double space. The boss was impressed because she always seemed very busy. And she was, but only because she spent so much time supervising us and not enough time on her own work. She never listened to explanations of why things were done a certain way to conform to government requirements on medical records, and would just start talking over the top of whoever was speaking to remind us that we just didn't know how to do things and we needed to follow her instructions. Things started going especially badly when she took a major dislike to one of the team because she believed this person wasn't working efficiently, i.e. the way the manager wanted. She started piling work on top of this person, taking it away from the other 2 of us, until all I was doing was sitting at my desk waiting for the day to end. When our overwhelmed coworker asked for help from us, we happily agreed. We all got a dressing down and official warnings because our coworker was supposed to do everything by herself. Then the manager went on maternity leave. The person acting in her position had been there forever, knew we were perfectly capable of doing our jobs without oversight, and left us to it. For a year, we all had meaningful work to do. We cooperated and relaxed, we all could laugh and talk to each other, and we started getting compliments on how fast and well we had completed tasks. Then our manager called to say she would be coming back. We went to her boss, pleading for help as we had done countless times before. Boss said, "Sorry, not sorry. She's a great manager. We should be looking forward to her return." Within the next 24 hours, 2 of us had quit. The third one stuck it out until the manager actually returned and then quit. At that point, the manager's role was changed, so she didn't have any underlings to manage. So at least she can't drive anyone else out, I guess. Story 37. Started working at Chipotle in 2017 just as their culture was really being pinched off by corporate. I used to love my team and the amount of effort everyone freely gave. They used to stipend us for crew parties so we could bond. I've seen so many managers come and go, but the worst was a man, who won't be named, that told other managers, "If you want to make everyone happy, go scoop ice cream." Blatantly disrespectful to the crew if he could be bothered to even speak to you. 6 years, and what broke me was being told to take out my infinity loop nose rings that have never once been taken out. You can witch at me all you want, but when you try to tell me how to wear my body, I'm out. Story 38. This is my brother's story. Several years ago, he worked as a team lead for a company that was toxic as heck, overworked the staff, and cut corners on the products. Not long after he started there, he was already job hunting but not finding anything, so he was sticking it out. One day, they reduced the department by 2/3. My brother and the ones kept on staff watched their former coworkers clean out their desks, smiling because they were out of hell with severance. Those left behind were going to be stuck with about 4 people's worth of work to each team member. My brother typed up a resignation letter to hand in at the next instance of mistreatment. He didn't have to wait long. The next day, the manager and VP called him into a meeting and cussed him out and yelled at him for not being a true leader, and told him he better get his worthless team in line. Did this in earshot of said team, by the way. "You're absolutely right," my brother said. "I'm going to be the leader my team needs starting now." He pulled his resignation out of his back pocket, threw it on the table, and walked out. His remaining teammates all got up and walked out with him and left the manager and VP with no engineers at all in the company. As you can imagine, the company didn't last long after that. And if you like these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.